questions without end. Because while my daughter lives in a world that knows what happens to women is wrong, it has also accepted this wrongness as inevitable. When a rich man in Delaware was given probation for raping his 3-year-old daughter, there was outrage. But it was the lack of punishment that seemed to offend, not the seemingly immovable fact that some men rape 3-year-olds. Prison time we can measure and control. That some men do horrible things to little girls, however, is presented as a given. Living in a place that has given up on the expectation of your safety means walking around in a permanently dissociative state. You watch these things happen to you, you walk through them on the subway and on the street, you see them on the television, you hear them in the music, and it's just in the air you breathe, so you narrate the horror to yourself because to engage with it would be self-destruction. I spoke on a panel once with a famous New Age author/guru in leather pants, and she said that the problem with women is that we don't speak from our power, but from a place of victimization. As if the traumas forced upon us could be shaken off with a steady voice, as if we had actual power to speak from. Victimhood doesn't need to be an identity, but it is a product of facts. Some women heal by rejecting victimhood, but in a world that regularly tells women they're asking for it, I don't know that laying claim to victim is such a terrible idea. Recognizing suffering is not giving up, and it's not weak. Something bad happened to me. More accurately, someone did something bad to me. This happened. This happens. When this reality started to become more and more clear to me, as I grew breasts and took subways, watched movies and fucked boys, I didn't make a conscious decision not to lie down and die, but I do know that my survival instinct took over and I became the loudest girl, the quickest with a sex joke, the one who laughed at old men coming on to her. If I was going to be a sex object, I was going to be the best sex object I could be. Over 20 years later, I still feel sick. I still can't sleep. But at least now I understand why. We know that direct violence causes trauma. We have shelters for it, counselors, services. We know that children who live in violent neighborhoods are more likely to develop PTSD, the daily fear changing their brains and psychological makeup so drastically that flashbacks and disassociation become common. We know people who are bullied get depressed and sometimes commit suicide. Yet despite all these things we know to be true, despite the preponderance of evidence showing the mental and emotional distress people demonstrate in violent and harassing environments, we still have no name for what happens to women living in a culture that hates them. We are sick people with no disease, given no explanation for our supposedly disconnected symptoms. When you catch a cold or a virus, your body has ways of letting you know that you are sick. You cough, you get a fever, your limbs literally hurt. But what diagnosis do you give to the shaking hands you get after a stranger whispers pussy in your ear on the way to work? What medicine can you take to stop being afraid that the cab driver is not actually taking you home? And what about those of us who walk through all this without feeling any of it? What does it say about the hoops our brain had to jump through to get to ambivalence? I don't believe any of us walk away unscathed. I do know, though, that a lot of us point and laugh. The strategy of my aunts and mother is now my default reaction when a 15-year-old on Instagram calls me a cunt, or when a grown-up reporter writes something about my tits. Just keep pointing and laughing, rolling your eyes with the hope that someone will finally notice that this is not very funny. Pretending these offenses roll off our backs is strategic. Don't give them the fucking satisfaction. But it isn't the truth. You lose something along the way. Mocking the men who hurt us, as mockable as they are, starts to feel like acquiescing to the most condescending of catcalls. You look better when you smile. Because even subversive sarcasm adds a cool girl nonchalance, an updated, sharper version of the expectation that women be forever pleasant, even as we're eating shit. This sort of posturing is a performance that requires strength I do not have anymore. Rolling with the punches and giving as good as we're getting requires that we subsume our pain under a veneer of I don't give a shit. This inability to be vulnerable, the unwillingness to be victims even if we are, doesn't protect us, it just covers up the wreckage. But no one wants to listen to our sad stories unless they're smoothed over with a joke or nice melody, and even then, not always. No one wants to hear a woman talking or writing about pain in a way that suggests that it doesn't end. Without a pat solution, silver lining, or happy ending, we're just complainers, downers who don't realize how good we actually have it. Men's pain and existential angst are the stuff of myth and legends and narratives that shape everything we do, but women's pain is a backdrop.